Welcome to BizzTalk. This is our second edition of this weekly show that we're going to do, talking about the events industry and other topics along those lines. I'm really excited today to have Matthew Morris with us. Matthew, say hi to everybody.
Hi, I'm Matthew. It's great to be here. Great to see you, Jason. Looking forward to having a good talk today.
You too. Always a pleasure when we get a chance to talk. And Matthew is a business leader in the gaming industry and been a part of the event industry for a long time as well. Former head of sales at Multiplay and Unity, and just has had an opportunity to work at really some big companies, small companies, and a lot of really great experience. So really excited to have you here today. As usual,
a lot of events.
What's that?
Every angle. So, attending trade shows, both as an exhibitor, a speaker, just going around to meet people and find out about the industry. So, looking forward to having the opportunity to share some of what I've had so far.
Perfect. That's exactly what I'm hoping for. We're keeping it pretty casual here today. So just kind of conversational. And I think we're going to get some good stuff for our audience here. But real quick, Matthew, if you want to just take maybe 30 seconds to a minute to just kind of give people a quick snippet of your background and where you're coming from, just so kind of they can understand your perspective.
Yeah, certainly. So I've been in kind of business to business IT tech sales now for, it's got to be over 20 years, ranging from selling everything from printer cartridges early on in my career all the way through to IBM mainframe systems and System X and AS400s, through to software as a service for companies like Unity and kind of infrastructure as a service for companies like Multiplay, where I joined them about 5 years ago and helped grow and scale that business in the cloud, serving games companies. A huge amount of which has been the business generated throughout my career has kind of been in events of some form. Kind of going out, making connections, and getting that initial point of contact when you meet people at events.
Okay. Now, with you, with that note there, are virtual events going to be as efficient as in-person events for that right there? Like you said, meeting people. It's been a big part of what what you've been doing. Is it as effective?
So. I think about the kind of the three main avenues for creating connections and kind of building business at events. And they kind of, for me, they've kind of fall into three categories. It's when you walk around a show floor, you attend an event, you can go and you can speak to people on the expo floor or people at events, and you can make connections that way. As an exhibition stand holder, you can make connections with people that are walking around. So you've got a stand, people will come to you. And then the third one is actually just kind of bumping into people randomly at the event and being able to just connect with people from your industry or from your space at the event. I think where I see virtual events playing really well is in those kind of first two categories of actually being able to go out and meet people and go around a virtual event, go to talks, listen to things, and you can take information that way. You can go along to a virtual event and you can share information and you can make connections that way. I think what we haven't really seen so far from a virtual event perspective is that impromptu, just being able to bump into somebody at an event from the same industry, that kind
right.
of that randomness that you get with people of the same interests being in a space. So I think with virtual events, so you have to be a lot more proactive, and you have to put a lot more kind of planning and preparation in order to really maximize your return on what is your most valuable commodity of time. And the more proactive you are about being intentional about what you want to get out of that event, the more you're going to get out of it.
Okay. Now, obviously, it's one of those things where I see like the event industry in general has been kind of slowly trying to adopt virtual strategies over the last few years, right? I mean, there's a lot of events that have kind of like an online counterpart, and some are good and some are really awful. It's just not well done. How much, I mean, how far have we really come? I mean, COVID has kind of accelerated that need, right? These in-person events are, I mean, for the most part, they're just decimated right now. But
Yeah.
I mean, how far have we come in that technology and that execution? How far do we really need to go?
I think there's a huge amount further that we need to go.
Right.
You know, just to really create a quality experience. A lot of the virtual events that I've seen running since the start of the kind of different lockdowns around the world, kind of consist of a number of talks that you can kind of go along to, a number of you know, round tables that you might be able to get involved in to make connections, along with kind of some very rudimentary kind of expo floor virtualization, which at the moment just kind of comes across as a little, you know, a browser experience. You may as well just put a list of companies' websites out there. And I think there's a huge amount more that needs to go on to really kind of provide all those connections that people got from a physical event inside a virtual world, and really make it a quality use of people's time.
Okay. I like that. So we still got a long way to go. Well, with where things are at today, we've got coming to events, right? Any event that we have, we've got the organizer themselves, right?
Yeah.
They're trying to make money from exhibitors or sponsors and, you know, ticket sales, right? We have the exhibitors themselves. They're hoping to generate business. We've got speakers, which last week we talked a little bit about speakers with Dave Crane and just kind of where that's going with virtual events. And then we have attendees. In the current landscape, who has the advantage and who's still not quite getting the value like they used to?
Well, that's a really good question. I think there's huge amounts that can be done on that. And I think the thing that I always put it back to is, like, why are these events taking place? You know,
right.
Ultimately, the vast majority of these events are taking place so that, you know, schmuck salesperson can meet with somebody that might want to buy their stuff. And ultimately, all of the events are judged on, you know, what's the return on investment that companies are getting from them. You know, when you look at the rates to go to a physical trade show, and you look at, you know, it's $100 per square foot of show floor of empty concrete. You've got to put everything on top of it. You know, it can be an exceedingly expensive proposition to get hold of. But, you know, if you're getting the return on investment and you can go, right, well, we spent X amount, but actually we got 10X return in sales. That's what these events are really meant to be. And, you know, the challenge of that is, one, being able to measure it and being able to say, actually, you know, going to this event really did make that return. And secondly, it's, you know, people don't want to just be sold to. You know, I'm a salesperson. No one wants to talk to me. They want to know what value I can bring. And
I want to talk to you, Matthew.
Well, thanks, Jason. You're the only one. But like, it's all about, you know, who can bring value. And people don't want to go to a trade show and have people say, "Here, buy this." So this weird dynamic of, actually, you need to have something at the event that's really going to add value to someone attending the event. And so, you know, people, decision makers, when they're looking at their time's their most precious commodity.
Absolutely.
What's going to make them want to come along to an event and spend their time going around and meeting people there? And ultimately, it has to be what's going to add value to them. So you've got this dynamic you have to think about of the attendees need to get the value for their time investment, and then the businesses that want to go along and pay for the event normally and fund the event, they need to be able to get a return on their investment. So it's constantly balancing this. You know, you don't want to have an event which is purely, here's a list of purchase orders you can fill out, or the other side of that, which is here's huge amounts of value to the people attending it, but actually they're not going to generate any revenue or any business for the company sponsoring the thing. So it's finding that balance between those two ends of the spectrum.
Okay, that's excellent. I like that. Now we're talking about generating value for people. Let's just for a second, let's maybe dive a little bit deeper with your experience at Unity. Okay, obviously
Yeah.
Unity does trade shows,
Yeah.
right? And usually probably they're doing maybe getting a little bit more involved with speakers and things like that. But usually as an exhibitor, right, they're trying to get business. So in the past, how would Unity measure that value? How would they measure that value out of an event and say, yeah, you know what? That event was great. We're going to do that one again. That one totally sucked. We're not doing that one again. And maybe, how could someone trying to solve this problem maybe create that same value for a company like Unity?
Yeah, so it's all about tracking that return on investment.
Right.
So each year we would look at, there's hundreds of events that we
Right.
can attend. And it's all about looking at, okay, well, which events have we tried and which ones haven't we tried? And we would, if it was a new event that we hadn't tried before, we would give it a go. There was an event we did last year. Yeah, we'd never done it before. We went there, came back from it and went, actually, we didn't meet decision makers. We didn't really make an impact. Right, fine. We won't do that one next year. So there's that iterative process of kind of finding where the best place to invest money and time is. The other one would be, we would look at, how much business have we generated from that event? And that's quite easy to track. So we would look at collecting all the data, and data's king. So we collect all the data of who had attended the event, what interactions we had at the event, and be able to track those through to, have people got out and bought a Unity license or one of our products off the back of that. But also really just, how many people had we interacted with an event? There's that immediate, this is your return on investment of dollars generated from the event, but there's also how many people have been influenced and touched by that event.
Right.
So certainly the evangelist team would do a huge amount just to speak to as many people as possible and then educate them on what is possible with Unity.
Okay. So then for the same, on the same token, what kind of, would it just be return on investment at that point, or would enhanced data, what would it take for a company like Unity to get the same value out of a virtual event that they would at, let's say, a GDC? Which, again, maybe GDC is an outlier as far as events goes, right? It's just this massive event. But, how does a virtual event potentially duplicate that value?
Well, it's interesting because GDC went kind of virtual this year. And for those of you watching the stream that don't know, GDC is the Games Developers Conference. It's the biggest games industry conference globally. And that event would attract pretty much all of the best of the best in the games industry every year. So that event went virtual this year, and a very different type of experience. Because actually, when I was talking about those three strategies, kind of walking around the show floor, being on a stand or giving a talk, those two interactions. The third one is everything that kind of goes on around the event. And GDC, there were people that flew to San Francisco that never went to GDC during that week. They would just be around the event having meetings in bars. Most people are at the W or the Regis, in their lobby doing business there. And that's the bit that I think hasn't necessarily been replicated. But from a marketing perspective, of having your presence and educating people on what your latest releases are, what you've got coming up, it's still extremely valuable doing that virtually. And Unity use that as a platform for their biggest announcements and their biggest releases, as do most of the other tech companies that are going to be there. That's a big milestone. People expect the biggest keynotes and the biggest announcements to come out during that week. So, people are already add attention to see, what the latest industry news is going to be. So that's where a virtual event can really bring a lot of value, is creating that attention, and it's kind of the amplification effect. E3 is another games industry example, a huge week for the press and the games industry press to really get together with the games developers and publishers to talk about what's going on. Now, if all of those publishers made their announcements at different weeks throughout the year, they would all get attention. But because E3 is happening during that 1 week, actually it means that everybody, I'm constantly refreshing the news to see what games announcements and what games are coming out during that week. And it just means that you get that amplification effect of the event, which is not necessarily the event itself. E3 has mostly been closed off to the public, and it's more of a press event. But that event means that everybody knows it's going on, and everybody then has the opportunity to really focus on the big announcements, which means that your bang for your buck of announcing your latest game is going to be amplified because there's that focus on it during that time.
Okay, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of it like that, but it makes perfect sense. Just getting drowned out, I guess, a little bit at these big events, even though you might have the greatest update in the entire world, everybody else is doing the same thing.
Well, yeah, but actually, it's funny. Like that can be a good thing, because actually, all the announcements going on during an event like that, it means that actually everybody's searching for them. Everybody's looking for those announcements and the trailers and everything else that comes out of it. So you might not have any competition in column inches a month before, but actually everybody's focused on that content during that time. So actually, the fact if you're putting out a game trailer in the same week as EA, Bethesda, all the other big companies, you're going to be in a position where people are looking for those game trailers, and they'll find yours as well.
That's right. Absolutely. Interesting. So let's kind of move on to maybe a slightly different angle. So do we ever get back to in-person events? I mean, obviously, I feel like we will, but at the same time, I feel like we've also kind of discovered this new, hey, you know what? I could attend events that are happening in San Francisco, but I could stay in New Zealand and not leave my house, or I can stay here in Austin, Texas, and not have to fly out to San Francisco. So, I mean, what does that really look like? Where do you see things kind of migrating to?
I think no one's got a crystal ball, but
sure.
From my perspective, I think a lot has changed during this. And the cost and expense and the time it takes to go to an event physically, especially if it's in a different country, in a different continent, and it's a huge amount to fly to some of these events. But I think people that didn't go to them had that FOMO, fear of missing out, of I'm not at that event, maybe I should be. Look at all the great stuff happening. I think switching to more virtual events gives people that opportunity to be more included. And I think there's been a huge amount of resistance to virtual events historically, because a physical event can be great fun. You don't necessarily go there for the talks or to walk around the expo floor. You go there because it's a great experience and it's a great trip. I think people will spend their time doing things they really enjoy rather than making up excuses to go to physical trade shows. And I think this year, especially where physical trade shows haven't been an option, everyone's looking at, okay, well, we still need to make those connections. Salespeople have still got to go out and meet people that would be interested in their products, and looking and exploring virtual events. Now's the time to do it. And actually, I think once people see, we did this event for a fraction of what it cost us to send people to San Francisco for a week. and actually we got a similar sort of return on investment. Why did we spend all that money? And actually, I think there'll be a huge pivot over, well, it's already happened because of COVID, but I think that has just accelerated that move to virtual. The fact that we can sit here, you're in delightful Austin, Texas, here I am in the UK, and we can have a conversation as if we're next to each other now, and the technology and the internet kind of supports it and makes it easy. That wasn't really a thing 3 or 4 years ago. How many video conference calls would you have, and they wouldn't work? You'd be, are you muted? They would disconnect. Whereas actually now the technology's kind of enabled this to work seamlessly. You don't think about it. I didn't even question whether or not this would work today. It's obviously it's going to work.
It is. It's pretty amazing. And actually, obviously BizzTalk has been putting on, virtual events for about 2 years. And we've had attendees from all over the world. One of the most interesting that I experienced was we did an esports event where we had, considering the breakdown from kind of all over the world, we had a lot of attendees from Africa, which I don't think that's normally an audience that gets to attend these types of esports events just based on logistics, right? And access. But even in places like Africa, now we've got fantastic internet connection, we've got connectivity. And so that virtual aspect really does connect more globally than, I've never been to GEC because I've never been able to put the budget together. Because it's just like, wow, that's going to be a lot, to make that happen. But, a virtual counterpart, yeah, absolutely. That makes sense because I can make that happen and I can meet people. So that's, I like that. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. And actually, you raise a really good point, which is, one of the things I found, certainly in the games industry, is, I would do GDC, Gamescom, a bunch of others every year. And it was great because you would go back and you would see the same people that you saw at the last GDC and at the last Gamescom, and you'd hang out in the same bars with the same people, and it was great to catch up with them once a year at these events. But you're only really seeing a small subset of the games industry at that sort of event. You're never, the restrictions of time, the money, you're only really seeing the people that can afford or have got a business case to go. So, a virtual event where actually you've got the opportunity to really kind of widen your net and meet with a lot more people and different people, really appeals. It's always great catching up with people that and good friends in the industry, but really having the opportunity to connect with other people is fantastic. Even one of the BizzTalk events I did made some great connections with people in Africa that never would have met them at GEC or Gamescom.
No, not at all. I love that. Which, kind of, going just a little deeper, from the perspective of a sales leader, right? One of the big objectives, of course, is to try and, generate sales, generate leads, right? Do you see virtual events potentially being more effective for sales leaders and sales teams because of the access, or is it maybe a new challenge with that over in-person events?
I think with all of it, it comes down to proper preparation prevents poor performance.
Yes.
Cheesy classic. And I think physical events, because you've got that possibility of being able to randomly bump into somebody in the hallway, or going into a talk or something, you're losing that. But I think with a virtual event, more than ever, that time you would have sat on an airplane flying out to go somewhere, sit down and do your preparation and your planning for the event.
Right.
Fantastic matchmaking platforms where you can really kind of here's an opportunity to make that initial contact with your target audience and target decision makers from home, from the office, or wherever you are, and actually make that initial connection so that your time at the event is then well spent. So I think more than ever, it's not so much one's better than the other. I think there's just a slightly emphasized importance of that planning stage to get ready for the event, because that's what's going to make a really big difference to how well it comes off of it. You know, I often liken it to, I'm sure you've seen this as well, where you go around a trade show and you see people and they've got their booth, they've paid all that money for, and they're at the back of the booth on their laptop, just, you know, checking up email or something. And like, they're not going to make any connections. They're not going to speak to anybody. Like, they're gonna probably spend the week there, nice hotel, a couple of nice meals or something. Go back to the office and go, yeah, it was rubbish. We didn't meet anybody. Like, you're not going to sat at the back of the stand, hiding, doing your email. Like, you have to be welcoming and, you know, engaging with people to be effective at a physical event. And it's the same thing in a virtual event. You've got to be putting yourself out there, making requests, you know, coming up with a reason that people should interact with you. And I think if the people that embrace that and recognize that will drive a huge amount of business from virtual events.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate that, Matthew. And as you're describing that, I'm like, I wonder what their CFO would think if they could see them after spending all the money on the exhibit and everything. Oh man.
Yeah. I mean, it's always been one of my pet hates when you walk around the expo hall and you're like, oh, okay, I'm looking for something. I don't even know what I'm looking for. I'm here to be educated and learn. Like, I've got no idea what that company does, and I'm probably never going to find out now. It could have been something that would really add value to my business, and I would have bought it straight away, but I'm never going to find out now. Don't mind.
Yep. Exactly. I have one more question for you, Matthew. It has nothing to do with events at all.
Okay.
What's the significance of the cranes behind you on your shelf there? I was admiring your shelf there, and I'm like, I see the games controllers, and that makes sense, and the books, and why the cranes?
They're the big Lego cranes. You can never have enough Lego, so those are the Lego Technics cranes. So that was kind of one of the first ones. And then the crawler crane came out, and then this is the new off-road crane. I just really enjoy a bit of Lego.
Hey,
you know, spending a week just kind of really focusing and trying to be creative and come up with things, taking some time out and just following the instructions of Lego of put this piece here. It's very mindful, very relaxing, and I thoroughly enjoy it. I am running out of space now of where to keep the Lego. There's more over there, and then there's more in the other room.
That's right.
My wife's crazy.
Well, I'm sure with quarantine, it's like, you know, I'm not commuting to work. I've got some more time for Legos, so
that's it.
Naturally, we need more space.
I think I'm going to need another shelf if Lego bring out any more cranes, certainly.
Absolutely. I love Legos as well. Ever since I was a little kid, that's kind of my go-to. My kids, they all love Legos. That's what even my daughter loves Legos. She asks for them. They ask for them for all their birthdays and stuff. And so usually if I'm doing something with them, it's like, hey, Dad, let's go. Let's play Legos. And we don't really follow the instructions anymore because, as you know, with kids, it all goes into a big box. It gets mixed up, the instructions disappear, but I love Legos, man. Even as an adult, it's just, it's timeless. It's timeless. So anyways, it's that's pretty much our time for today. Really enjoyed having you here today, Matthew, and always a pleasure when you and I get a chance to talk and do this stuff. I love it, man. Thanks for being here.
Absolute pleasure. Always great catching up with you, Jason.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks to all of our audience as well for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Enjoy your day.
Have a good one.